The last thing I remember was the sound of metal folding in on itself. Loud, final, like the world snapping shut. It wasn't just noise, it was pressure. A crushing, suffocating force that wrapped around my chest and squeezed. There was glass, I remember that too, raining down like angry glitter. A blur of headlights. A scream, not sure if it was mine or someone else's. Then nothing. Not blackness, just static. Cold static, buzzing around the edges of my mind. I opened my eyes, but it didn't feel like waking up. It felt like drifting to the surface of something thick, like tar. I was in a bed, stiff and too clean, the kind with rails on the sides like a prison disguised as care. My body wouldn't move. My chest barely rose. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even cry. The only thing I could control were my eyelids, heavy as stone. I blinked once, slowly. Through the glass wall across from me, I saw them. My family. My mother, clutching her hands to her chest. My brother with his jaw clenched. My father, eyes red, standing stiffly with both fists in his pockets like if he let go, he'd fall apart. They were watching me, their faces etched with worry and pain. It was real. This had to be real. A slow beep echoed in the room. The heart monitor. Each pulse felt like a reminder that I was still in here. Alive, somehow. But there was something else. A sound beneath the beeping, softer, persistent, whispering, like voices behind the walls, layered and impossible to decipher, always just out of reach. I strained to hear, to focus. It stopped when I tried, like it knew. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly. The smell, antiseptic, sharp, clung to everything. The shadows in the corners of the room felt a little too thick, like they didn't belong in this reality. And then I saw it. A figure. In the far corner of the room. I blinked, hard. It wasn't there a moment ago. It stood still, just beyond the edge of the room's light, its features blurred like a smudge on glass. My breath caught. Or maybe it never started. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't run. I just stared. The heart monitor's beeping continued. The whispers grew louder, and the figure didn't move. But somehow, I knew. It was waiting for me. When I finally opened my eyes, really opened them, it felt like pushing through the surface of water after being submerged for too long. For a moment, everything was still. The harsh white ceiling above me came into focus, and I realized I could move my head, if only slightly. My chest hurt. My limbs were heavy, but I was awake. I was alive. Through the glass wall, I saw them again. My family. My mother gasped, pressing her hand to the glass as tears rolled down her face. My brother nudged my father and pointed, and my father smiled, really smiled, with that rare softness I hadn't seen in years. Relief, joy, hope. Their faces radiated all of it, and for a split second, I felt safe. I wanted to lift my hand and wave to tell them it was okay, I was back. Then I blinked. It happened in an instant. The smiles froze, then stretched far too wide. My mother's eyes didn't blink. They just widened, and widened, and widened until the whites nearly swallowed the irises. My father's jaw slackened unnaturally, drooping like it was unhinged. My brother grinned, but it wasn't joy anymore. It was the grin of someone who wanted to hurt me. I blinked again, trying to clear my vision. Something was wrong. Maybe the pain meds, maybe the coma. I tried to convince myself I was hallucinating, but the lights flickered above me, buzzing with unnatural energy. The room around me suddenly felt colder. The warmth I'd clung to moments ago drained from the air like someone had opened a freezer. Then the nurses froze. One of them had been adjusting a chart at the foot of my bed. Another was checking my IV. They stopped mid-motion, perfectly still, like mannequins in mid-action. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at them, waiting for someone to move, to say anything. Then he entered. A doctor, I think, tall, thin, face hidden beneath a surgical mask, eyes completely black. He stepped forward, placed a gloved hand on my chest, and leaned in close enough that I could smell something metallic and rotting on his breath. He didn't speak normally. He whispered, and it was like the whisper sank into my ribs. "He's ready." That's all he said. The heart monitor let out a long, flat beep. I gasped. Then, after what felt like eternity, the beeping resumed, but slower. Backward. Each tone was reversed, playing in some cruel order that didn't belong to time or reason. Something moved beneath the bed. I felt the vibration against my spine. Something crawling. Something breathing where no person could fit. I wanted to scream. I opened my mouth. I pushed every bit of strength I had toward making a sound, but nothing came out. Only a low growl, deep and ancient, echoed from beneath the bed, vibrating through my bones, as if the sound had come from inside me. My family still stared through the glass. No longer people. No longer mine. And I realized I was surrounded. Awake. And completely alone. I stopped trying to move. My body hurt in ways that didn't make sense. Not just pain, but pressure. Like my limbs were wrapped in invisible hands constantly squeezing. So I did the only thing I could. I pretended. I closed my eyes halfway, let my breath slow, played dead. That's when the truth began to show. The nurse closest to me leaned over my bed. Her face, kind a moment ago, was twisted now, mouth open too wide as if her jaw had been snapped and put back wrong. She turned to the other nurse and spoke in a language I didn't understand. No, not a different language. It sounded like English in reverse, words unraveling and slipping backward out of her throat, like a cassette rewinding with voices trapped in it. I held still. The room felt colder than it had before, the kind of cold that presses into your bones and stays there. I exhaled once, just to test, and I saw it. My breath. Fog. Hanging in the air like a ghost that didn't want to leave. And yet no one else seemed to notice. Not the nurses, not the doctor now writing something down with a pen that moved without touching the paper. No one blinked. No one spoke to me. Just that warped, reversed speech between them. Almost chanting now. I shifted my gaze toward the glass wall across from me, where my family had once stood. They weren't out there anymore. They were inside the room. All three of them, standing silently at the foot of my bed. Not crying, not smiling, just watching. My mother's face was flat, pale, like all color had been drained from her. My father's eyes were pitch black, with nothing behind them. My brother, he just stared, lips twitching like he was suppressing a laugh. None of them blinked. None of them breathed. I felt something enter my vein. My eyes darted to my arm. A nurse, or what looked like one, had pushed a syringe into my IV line. The liquid was thick and black, like ink mixed with tar, slowly seeping into me. It burned as it traveled, cold and hot at the same time, like fire wrapped in ice. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip everything out and run. But I knew they were watching. All of them. So instead, I twitched my finger. Just a tiny movement. A reflex. The room went silent. Every single head turned to me in perfect unison. The nurses, the doctors, my family. They turned slowly, deliberately, as if they'd been waiting for a sign. And then, they smiled. Not warm smiles, not relief, predatory, unnatural, the kind of smile you see on something that's hungry. That's when I knew. They weren't keeping me alive. They were keeping me here. And they were waiting for me to wake up. Because the real nightmare hadn't even started yet. I couldn't stay in that bed any longer. Something inside me, something primal, screamed that if I waited one more second, I'd never get out. My body, still aching and foreign, moved like it was learning everything from scratch. I yanked the IV from my arm. Blood followed. The pain was sharp, but it told me I was still me, still real. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood, barely. My knees wobbled. The room tilted, but I moved. The second my bare feet hit the floor, the whispers stopped. The lights dimmed, just slightly, but I felt it. The air thickened, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then the door creaked open. I froze. A figure in scrubs stepped through. A mask, a cap, surgical gloves. The uniform was perfect, but the body inside it wasn't right. It moved in jolts, too tall for the doorframe, limbs too long, fingers twitching as though trying to remember how to act human. It saw me. Its head tilted at a sharp angle, like a bird eyeing prey. "We must finish the operation," it whispered, voice distorted like it was being played through a broken speaker. I ran, stumbled into the hallway, slamming into walls, dragging my hand across surfaces for balance. Every hallway looked the same: white walls, polished floors, blinking red lights. But they were all wrong. The lights weren't blinking randomly. They were pulsing, in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every corner I turned, they were there. More doctors, some crawling along the ceilings, others sliding soundlessly across the floors like ghosts in motion. Scalpel blades glinted from gloved hands. One of them was chewing something, wet, cracking sounds coming from behind their mask. I didn't look long enough to see what it was. I screamed for help. I shouted for a nurse, a guard, anyone. The only answer was a deep voice echoing through the speakers overhead. "He's awake. Begin preparation." I burst into a side room, bright, quiet. At first glance, it looked like a normal hospital suite. But there, in the bed, connected to machines, tubes in every limb, was me. I couldn't breathe. I walked closer, trembling. It was my face, my chest rising, my lips parted slightly like I was still asleep, still lost in a coma I didn't know I was in. Was this real? Was I real? I reached out, desperate to touch my own skin. And alarms blared. Red lights flooded the room. A klaxon roared from the ceiling. The other me didn't flinch, didn't move. But I did. Because behind me, I heard the doors hiss open. I turned around and saw them. A dozen doctors, eyes gleaming through foggy face shields, holding forceps, bone saws, rib spreaders. They moved as one. "It's time," one said. "The operation has been scheduled." And then they charged. I ran. I ran until my legs gave out, then crawled, then staggered upright again. Every hallway looked the same: white walls, blinding fluorescent lights, antiseptic stench that burned in my nose, but each one twisted ever so slightly. Doors appeared where there hadn't been any, others vanished. I grabbed one, yanked it open, and found not a hallway, but another hospital room. I slammed it shut, turned, another door, a supply closet, another, a restroom. I kicked open the next, and finally I saw a window. A giant one, stretching floor to ceiling, showing the world outside. I rushed to it. I was crying now, begging the universe for this to be over. My palms hit the glass, and outside wasn't the outside. It was another room, identical to mine. Another hospital bed, another IV, another monitor beeping in sync with mine. I blinked. The patient in the bed turned its head. It was me. I screamed and backed away, only for the walls to begin shifting around me. Not physically moving, no, but warping. Like reality had folds, and the hospital was bending itself into impossible shapes. I stumbled backward into a corridor I hadn't seen before, narrow, dimly lit, and turned a corner so sharp it nearly cut me. Then I saw him. A boy in a wheelchair. He had no legs, his gown was too big, his face was far too still. He looked at me with eyes that didn't belong in a child's head and said, perfectly calm, "You're not supposed to be awake." I asked him where the exit was. His lips didn't move, but I still heard him say, "There isn't one." I kept moving. I don't know why. Maybe hope is more stubborn than fear. I found another room, cold, dust-covered, and stepped inside, only to find every inch of the walls plastered with photos. Black and white, grainy, old, surgical scenes, patients under the knife, doctors in masks, hands holding tools over open flesh. I walked closer, drawn in by some terrible curiosity, and then I saw them. Me, in every photo, lying on the tables, cut open, eyes closed, face pale, each one from a different angle, a different time, over and over and over. My body, my face, repeated endlessly, like a slideshow of torment. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and the loudspeaker above me crackled to life. At first, it was static, then words. "Run! Hide! Run! Hide!" it repeated over and over. "Run! Hide! Run! Hide!" My own voice. I covered my ears, ran through the nearest door, and found myself back in the hallway from before. The same hallway, same burn marks on the floor, same smear of blood I'd left behind earlier. I hadn't moved at all. The building was looping me. I spun, trying to find anything, any sign of a way out. Then the floor beneath me shifted. I dropped into a room I hadn't seen, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. I scrambled to my feet and saw the worst thing yet. A surgical room. Cold metal trays. Masks hung like dead skin from pegs on the walls. Lights above, ready to shine down. The door slammed behind me. I turned to run. Another slammed. The final door creaked open, and they came in. Masked doctors, one by one. Slowly, steadily. Each of them humming something low and tuneless. They circled me, tools glinting in hand. The light flicked on overhead, bright and blinding. I raised my hands to shield myself as they came closer. There was nowhere left to go. No exit. No help. Only the procedure. They dragged me back to the table. I fought, kicked, screamed, but my body wasn't strong anymore. My muscles failed me, jelly in their hands. I was slammed down onto cold metal, wrists strapped tight with leather so aged it cracked as they pulled it. My legs followed. A restraint across my chest crushed the air from my lungs. I bucked once, twice, and stopped when I realized no one in the room blinked. They just watched. There were at least a dozen of them, all in surgical gear. Masks, gloves, face shields fogged from breath that didn't sound human. And none of them spoke, not in words I understood. They began to chant. Low, guttural tones that vibrated through the room like sound was bleeding out of the walls. It wasn't language. It was older than language. I wanted to close my eyes, but they forced them open with clamps. I could only look at the ceiling, until one of the doctors leaned over me and slowly pulled off his mask. It was my father. But it wasn't him. The face was his, but warped. Eyes too small, jaw too long, skin stretched as if it had been sewn on. He looked at me and smiled, and in a voice both his and not, he whispered, "We tried to keep you asleep, but you kept waking up." I begged. I begged like a child, sobbing now, pleading for them to let me go, to tell me what was happening. But the chanting only got louder. The room began to shake. The lights above spun faster and faster, until they were a blur, throwing shadows that moved on their own. Then the instruments rose, not by hand. They floated. Scalpels, forceps, scissors, dozens of them, levitated into the air and hovered above my body, rotating slowly like a halo made of pain. One glided down and grazed my cheek. Another hovered just inches from my eye. I screamed, but the sound didn't come from my mouth. It echoed from the ceiling above, as if some other version of me was already in torment. And still, the face that wore my father kept watching me with cold delight. "I promise," I gasped, voice shaking. "I'll stop fighting. I'll stay. I'll let you finish. Just don't let it hurt." The face bent lower. "It always hurts," it whispered. The blades trembled, aligning perfectly. Then one dropped. The scalpel descended slowly, deliberately, and touched just above my sternum. I felt the first cold cut as if it were burning through my soul. My back arched, but the restraints held me fast. Everything went white, like light had burst from inside my skull. And in that endless second before darkness came, I heard it. A whisper in my own voice, soft and final. "Now you'll understand." Then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, everything was quiet. Too quiet. No beeping monitors. No fluorescent hum. Just silence. thick and padded like the air had weight. I was lying on a soft white bed in a clean room that didn't look like any part of the hospital I remembered. The walls were smooth, featureless, glowing gently from within. The floor beneath me felt like mist made solid. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel pain. No restraints, no cold metal. Just peace. For a moment, I thought maybe I was finally awake, that the horror was over, that I'd made it. Then I saw the bed next to mine, and I stopped breathing. It was me. Again. Lying still, unmoving. Tubes in my nose, wires snaking down from monitors I couldn't hear. My skin looked pale, almost blue. Lips parted slightly. Eyes closed in that same way I'd seen in the photos. The me in that bed wasn't asleep. He was gone. The door opened soundlessly, and a man walked in wearing a pristine white coat. He looked human, calm, collected, even warm. But his eyes were too still, like glass marbles pressed into his skull. He smiled politely, like a receptionist welcoming someone into a lobby. "You've completed the cycle," he said. "It's time we talked." I asked him where I was. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he stepped aside and gestured toward the mirrored wall. I looked, and I saw nothing. No reflection. Just the empty room behind me. The bed. The pale version of me lying motionless. But not me. I turned back to him, my mouth dry. "You didn't survive the crash," he said gently. "You've been here ever since. Everything you experienced. This facility, the doctors, your family, the chase. It was all part of the processing." I tried to speak, but no words came. My throat felt hollow. "You weren't supposed to wake up," he continued. "But you did. Again and again. Some souls resist crossing over. They fight it. It creates noise, confusion, fragmented perceptions. We did our best to guide you gently, but you weren't ready." Processing. That's what he called it. As if this place wasn't a hospital, but a filter. A border between two worlds. A place where the soul goes to be unmade. I backed away, heart pounding. He didn't move, but the room behind him did. Faces appeared in the walls, blurred, melting faces that shifted like static on a broken screen. My mother, my brother, strangers, the doctors. Their features warped, flickering between kindness and horror. Life and death. They were masks, all of them. And I had been talking to masks this whole time. I stumbled to the mirror, desperate for something real, and pounded on it. I begged to wake up, to go back. I shouted for another chance, a do-over, anything. The man just stood there, watching. "You weren't ready to leave your body," he said, almost with pity. "But now you know. You're not in the hospital anymore. You're not in pain. You're not even in time." I looked down at my hands. They were fading, not bleeding, not dying, just ceasing, turning to light, smoke, thought. And the whisper returned, the one I had heard in the dark. "Now you'll understand." And I did. I was never meant to wake up, and I never truly did.